G'day, Dave here. Welcome back to Ecclesiastes. It's easy to get lost in a book like Ecclesiastes, so I want to give you a few tips on how to make the most of reading this. Remembering first of all that Ecclesiastes is a book written about 3,000 years ago, which is quite extraordinary given how perceptive it is about life back then and even life today. It's written as a research project, so the king, probably Solomon, applying all of his resources to understand the nature of life, not kind of top down from God giving him the answers, but exploring under the sun what he sees and then thinking about that in the light of his faith in God. We see that he explores a whole range of different topics and he's looking for value, purpose, meaning, something which will last, something which will give real substance to life. And here's the spoiler. What he discovers very, very quickly is that he cannot find meaning by looking around in this world, and he says meaningless, meaningless, utterly meaningless, everything is meaningless. And 38 times we get this word havel, meaning a mist or a vapor. Things are here and then they're gone. Now, we'll pick it up at chapter 2, and I'm going to read to you from verses 12 down to 16. Then I turned my thoughts to consider wisdom, and also madness and folly. What more can the king's successor do than what's already been done? I saw that wisdom is better than folly, just as light is better than darkness. The wise have eyes in their heads, while the fool walks in darkness. But I came to realize that the same fate overtakes them both. Then I said to myself, the fate of the fool will overtake me also. What then do I gain by being wise? And I said to myself, this too is meaningless. For the wise, like the fool, will not be remembered, for the days have already come when both have been forgotten. Like the fool, the wise must die. So the writer here is exploring at this point the nature of wisdom versus foolishness. And I guess there's a big argument, isn't there, that it's just common sense. It's better to be wise than it is to be foolish. We'll avoid all kinds of hassles and dramas and pitfalls in this life if we just think a bit, if we apply wisdom to what we see. And this is part of a whole genre of literature in the Bible called wisdom literature, which is by and large hitting the pause button and reflecting on life as we see it. And here he's contrasting wisdom with foolishness. And in verse 13 he says, wisdom is better than folly, just as light is better than darkness. It's better to go through life with your eyes open, pay attention, learn what you can, and you'll have a better life because of it. But, and here is the problem, what he comes to realize is it doesn't matter how wise you are in life or how foolish and unguardedly stupid you might be in life, the same fact is at the end for each of us, and that is death. The big spoiler in the book of Ecclesiastes is he keeps coming back to our mortality, and just like the death toll with the coronavirus reminding us that we are not immortal, that we won't go on forever, so he looks at the fact that death overtakes us all. And it doesn't seem to matter whether you are really wise or really foolish, you end up in the same place. Let me tell you about an example in my life which was very confronting. I studied social work at university back in the early 80s, and it was a pretty unusual kind of faculty. We had one lecturer who would write on the blackboard backwards, so the easiest way to read his writing was to turn around and look at it through a mirror, just an aside. But what we did for the very last kind of activity of the course was we had an excursion, this is right, an excursion to the Sydney morgue. And when we went into the Sydney morgue, which was a pretty confronting experience, I'd never seen a dead body before, we were invited just to look at one on a TV screen. That was okay. Not way of telling really whether it was makeup or whether it was real. And we've certainly seen a lot of dead bodies made up on TV, if not real ones. And then secondly, we were invited into a room where there was a viewing area and there was a curtain. They could pull back the curtain behind the glass and we could see a dead, lifeless cadaver on a table. And that was a little bit more confronting. A naked, grey, lifeless body. And then, this was stage 3, this is where it got real. We were invited, no one had to do it, but we were invited into a room where there were many tables and many grey, lifeless bodies laid out, some skinny, some fat, some male, some female, some older, some younger. And in many ways, it didn't matter what they looked like. You knew nothing about them. And one could have been the Mayor of Sydney, another a homeless person. One could have been a professor at the university, another a school dropout. The reality was the same fate had overtaken each person. And that was the fate that was going to one day overtake each of us who were there to view. And that is that we're going to die. And that recognition that we're not immortal, that our days are numbered, that one day we will die and will give account, is absolutely critical to living a wise life. It's absolutely essential to grasping if there is any meaning or purpose or value in life. If we think that somehow or other our death is irrelevant to life, then we have missed the boat. Ecclesiastes is going to point us to there being a hope beyond this life, a hope beyond our mortality. But we've got to identify and we've got to come to grips with the fact that our days are numbered if we're ever going to appreciate that. Thanks.